Welcome back to another episode of Titans of Foodservice, where we delve deep into the world of food service, having the conversations around innovation, creativity, and empowering stories with the movers and shakers who have made it to the top. I'm your host, Nick Portillo, and today we have a special guest whose remarkable career spanned multiple industries and a wealth of experience. Brian is truly a titan in the world of business and sales management. Brian Will is no stranger to the world of entrepreneurship, having embarked on a journey that led him to become a serial entrepreneur. His track record of success speaks volumes, having co-founded and led 7 highly successful companies across diverse sectors. These ventures reached a staggering valuation of over $500 million at their zenith, showcasing Brian's exceptional acumen for innovation and growth. Notably, Brian is not just a business visionary, but also a prolific author, earning the esteemed distinction of being a two-time Wall Street Journal best-selling author. His insights and wisdom have been shared in his writings, offering invaluable guidance to aspiring entrepreneurs and industry leaders alike. But Brian's impact doesn't stop there. His expertise extends to revitalizing companies ranging from startups to Fortune 500 giants and propelling them to unprecedented heights. He has masterfully orchestrated turnarounds that have resulted in billions of dollars in sales, proving his ability to transform challenges into remarkable opportunities. What sets Brian apart is his ability to grasp agile processes and principles from a multifaceted perspective. His profound understanding spans from the development team to the executive board, making him a true bridge between vision and execution. Today, in addition to his illustrious career, Brian's passions have led him to the vibrant food service industry. He owns a flourishing chain of restaurants in the dynamic Atlanta area, adding a unique flavor to the culinary landscape. Beyond that, he's engaged in the world of real estate, managing both residential and commercial properties in Georgia and Florida. But his contributions don't end at the business realm. Brian's commitment to his community shines as he serves on the city council in his hometown of Alpharetta, Georgia. His dedication to the betterment of his surroundings mirrors his commitment to success and growth. Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to dive in the insights and wisdom of a true visionary as we delve into the journey, experiences, and wisdom of Brian Will on this episode of Titans of Foodservice. Let's go ahead and welcome Brian. All right, Brian, welcome to the Titans of Foodservice podcast. I'm so excited to have you on here today. Been looking forward to our conversation. I read a lot about you and your success in the world of business, and I know you have a lot to share today, and I know it'll resonate with a lot of the people listening in, so thank you for joining.
Nick, this is awesome. I can't believe I'm on a podcast called Titans of Podcasts. I want to know if that makes me a Titan now, because I've always wanted to be a Titan.
Yeah, no, for sure. I would definitely categorize you as a Titan, no doubt.
That is awesome.
So why don't we start off with you've started and sold businesses, maybe like a background so the listeners can understand kind of your history as an entrepreneur.
Sure. So my history goes back to basically failing out of high school, joining the military, got off active duty, couldn't hold a job, got fired as a waiter, got fired as a busboy. I mean, literally, I couldn't hold any job of any kind, so I figured I might as well start my own business. So first business was landscaping, relatively successful until it failed. Mm-hmm. And then I got into the insurance industry, sold my first company to a venture capital group in 1999. Second company I sold to a venture capital group in 2006 was also in the insurance industry, technology platform. Did another company in online marketing, which we sold to a private equity group in 2008. And then went on and did consulting in sales and management consulting for Fortune 500 companies. And along the way, did what is a cliche when people sell companies is I thought, I always take my employees out to happy hour every day. I should buy a restaurant. That's what I should do because clearly I'm a good business guy. I can run a restaurant. So I bought my first restaurant, and I think I said I've had as many as 15. I currently have 4 operational, 2 under construction. Written a couple of books since then, got into politics in my local hometown. I got into the real estate business, and so I'm kind of all over the board these days, but still have my feet in the restaurant industry. A lot of ups and downs there.
Yeah, I can imagine. If we go back to your time starting up your landscaping business, what did that look like?
I used to call it me, a truck and a shovel, getting started. And that's what I was. But I built it up and I built it up, and then I decided to franchise it. And then I had 7 franchises. And then due to a series of mistakes, you learn the most from mistakes in business, more so than you do your successes a lot of times. Lost that company when I was 29 years old, I think, and had to start all over again. But when I lose, I learn. And I learned a lot in those failures. So that's when I started my next company selling insurance, and then turned it into a direct-to-consumer call center platform and sold it to a venture capital group. So I've been in multiple industries here.
You mentioned that you learned, even though you lost the business, you learned some things from that experience. What are some of the things that you did learn?
Well, so in my first business, one of the first big things I learned was, number one, do not have the majority of your business coming from one client. I had 90% of my business with one client. And when that client fired me, we were in trouble. And unfortunately, I had all the overhead, all the expense of running a company, but I only had one client. So when I lost a client, I lost all the revenue, and I still had all the expense. And we got in trouble because of that. The second thing was I was living beyond my means in that first company. I was a young kid when I started at 21, and I'm now 29 years old and making a little bit of money, and had a nice car and motorcycle and Mercedes, and I had a place at the beach. And unfortunately, my personal expenses were 101% of my income. And once again, when the business went down, so did everything I had personally. And so I ended up losing pretty much everything. And today I don't make those mistakes. In business, I carry big cash in the back to take care of me. I do what's called secure your lifestyle at different levels as you start to build. We diversify our income base. We diversify our customer base. A lot of things in those 2 big failures that I've carried through. Interestingly enough, my first restaurant failed. I told you I bought that restaurant, and I had it for about a year. And after a year, it had lost about $75,000. And I was like, okay, this is not fun. So what am I going to do? So I went and bought 4 more. Because, when you fail, you quadruple down and try it again. So,
of course,
I bought 4 more, got rid of the first one. And interestingly enough, they were super successful. Now, mind you, they'd been around for a long time. They were a semi-little brand in our area. And so then I thought, well, heck, I'm running 4 companies here. I am clearly a restaurateur. I know what I'm doing. So I'm going to go build a couple. And so I built one, and then I bought one and remodeled it and turned it to a different brand. And both of those failed. And this is when I learned my first big lesson in the restaurant business is, unless you are a brand or you are a location or destination, your chances of success are really, really tough. Mm-hmm. So that was a big one we learned early on in the restaurant business with those failures. And then went on to buy and build and sell more. And today we're building a small brand here in the Atlanta market called Central City Tavern. So I've had a lot of ups and downs in the restaurant business.
You seem to be someone who is comfortable with taking risks. Coming out of high school, jumping right into owning your own business and, owning multiple businesses, getting into the restaurant industry, which it's risky for sure to run your own restaurant, as you know. What is it, do you feel that, how are you able to do that, take on that amount of risk each time?
Yeah, so early on, I didn't have anything to lose. I always used to say, I don't have any risk. I have nothing to lose. If I go bankrupt, what are they going to take my 15-year-old truck with 150,000 miles on it? There was no risk. I was risking a piece of junk truck for another piece of junk truck, as I like to say. As I made money, after I sold a couple companies in venture capital and private equity, and now I'm I would say really well off. Today, I don't risk principal. I only risk income, and this is my risk tolerance. So I know if I'm going to invest in something, whether it's a restaurant or a business or an investment, I will risk up to my income level, but I will not risk my assets because I know I can make more money. As long as I'm only risking the money and not the assets, I'll still have the assets and I'll be able to make more money. So my risk tolerance, while I have it, is limited to whatever that bandwidth is of income.
Sure, that makes sense. Coming out of the 2020 COVID pandemic, being in the food service industry, I felt at the time, I was like, a lot of restaurants are going through a very tumultuous time, many going out of business. And I could see a lot of entrepreneurs from other industries getting into the restaurant business, starting their own restaurant and, maybe picking up where somebody left off. Do you feel owning a restaurant, the skills you learned in your prior companies in separate industries, those skill sets are transferable into the restaurant business?
So here's what I teach in business and what I do. I'm a tactical business coach, right? I can tell you that I don't know anything about running a restaurant. In my 12, 13 years, I don't know what a seating chart is. I don't know how to ring anything into the POS. I don't know how to cook. I don't cook in my own house. Never used my oven downstairs ever, not once. I don't know how to bartend. I literally am useless inside the four walls of that restaurant. What I know how to do is run a business. And when I hear people say this all the time, well, restaurants are tough. That's a tough business. And I challenge that because it's not. It's not any tougher than starting a tie shop or a clothing store or a retail shop. It's not any different. The challenge we see in the restaurant business is, though, you're very visible, right? Because my restaurant's visible to the public and people either drive or walk by it every day. So if it fails, everybody sees it. Not everybody's down at the mall to see the shoe shop go under, because you're not out in public and people are walking in, about 3,000 people a week in my Alpharetta location. So I don't believe that the failure rate is that much higher in the restaurant business. I will tell you the reason most restaurants fail, however, is because they're started by chefs who don't understand business. They're started by managers who don't understand business, or they're started by people who don't understand business at all and just think they're going to start a restaurant and have fun, which is my first one, by the way, and hang out and give out drinks at the bar and it's just going to be a party. And they don't really understand the business behind the restaurant, right? I tell people all the time, my restaurant managers know how to run a restaurant, but they don't know how to run the business. I know how to run the business, but don't know how to run the restaurant. And that's the difference. So yes, business lessons are the same no matter what your business is. You have to understand core metrics, financials, P&L analysis. You have to understand trends. You have to understand everything about how to run a business more so than you need to know how to cook a hamburger and make a Jack and Coke.
Sure. When you look at the metrics, what are some of the metrics that you are tracking and looking at?
Yeah, so we call it the four metrics. So there's four major metrics in the restaurant business. It's food cost over food sales, liquor cost over liquor sales, labor over gross sales. Those are the big three. And then it's rent divided by revenue. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when we figure out those four metrics, we know that as long as you have a certain level of revenue that exceeds your OPEX, and your OPEX is different in any restaurant. So when we go in and do a restaurant analysis, the first thing we look at is your basic OPEX, right? This is your fixed expense. Then we look at your variable expense. And then we look at your food, liquor, labor, and rent over revenue, right? Mm-hmm. I can have great food, liquor, labor, but if I don't have enough revenue to overcome OPEX, I'm going to fail, right? So we have to have that minimum OPEX or minimum revenue. If we have the minimum revenue, as I like to say, so one of the location right up the street from me, I got to do 1.2 million to break even. That means if I do $1,199,999, I lose $1. And people come in on Friday night and they're like, "Oh my God, you're busy. You're making so much money." And I'm like, "No, I'm really not. I've lost $1 this month," right? On top of that 1.2 million, I have about a 50% profit margin on every dollar above that, because now I'm only dealing with my variables, which is food, liquor, labor, right? So everything above my break-even point, and most people that own restaurants don't know that break-even point. Everything above that is profit, as long as your margins are within tolerance. Mm-hmm. So when we look at a restaurant, we do a historical P&L, look at your food, liquor, labor, your revenue over rent, find your break-even point, and then we can predict what's going to happen in your restaurant. You'd be surprised how many restaurant owners have no idea what their P&L looks like.
I can imagine.
I mean, zero. They don't even keep them. I can tell you restaurants I've gone in to buy, and I'm like, "Give me your P&Ls over the last 24 months." And they're like, "I don't know what that is."
I met a guy recently, and he owns a business, and what his business does is he teaches dentists on how to run a business, because dentists, they go to school to learn how to, clean teeth and do what they do, but they have no idea what it takes to run a business. So he has a formulaic process he uses that dentists can buy and just follow along. Yep.
And basically he's setting up a P&L, he's setting up core metrics, you build the percentage. We call them little alleys. I liken it to bowling, right? You ever gone bowling with kids? You have kids, by the way?
No, I don't, but I have before.
Well, when you get kids and they're young, you put the gutter guards up, right?
Yep.
And so the kids throw that ball, and as long as it's bouncing around the gutter guard, it'll bounce around, it'll go down, it'll knock the pins down. So when we figure out what your core metrics are, we set up the gutter guards. And as long as you stay within those gutter guards and those percentages, you're going to be profitable, right? Just like a kid bowling. If you get outside of them, that's where you're in trouble.
Yeah, for sure. When you look at the food costs and your liquor cost, is it formulaic? Is there like a percentage of cost that you're looking for each one?
Yep. So, and this is going to be relatively generic. It might be different for a super high-end restaurant serving a $200 steak. But for the majority of the restaurants out there, 28% food cost is where it needs to be. 28% food, 4% paper. That's a relatively stable number. Liquor costs are going to come anywhere from 18 to 22. We run 22 on the high end only because in my restaurants we serve badass drinks. So I ask people, Nick, let me ask you a question, Nick. Here's a question for you.
Okay.
You're married? Are you married?
Yep.
Okay, so you're married. When you and your wife go out, do you know where the bar is that you can go to and they have badass drinks versus the bar you go to where it's like a half a glass for $14 and it's got like a shaved peel twisted on the top?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I would say.
You know where you're going to get badass drinks. And so
That's right.
we actually trademarked badass drinks.
I like
People
that.
know when they come to my restaurants, it's going to be a little heavier pour. It's going to be a lot more ice. It's going to be full. You're going to go, wow, this is a badass drink. And so we run a little high on the liquor cost because I know people come to my restaurant for that. Throw in my super comfy overstuffed seats at the bar and people sit there and watch sports for 2 hours drinking away and we're making a killing on the liquor.
Yeah, smart. What about in terms of profitability of a restaurant? What do you see there typically?
So it's interesting. I just did a podcast on this the other day, and I said most restaurants are running 10%, maybe 11, sometimes less. If you're running less than 15% net in your restaurant, you're doing it wrong. And if you're doing it really well and your revenue is significantly above that break even, you should be in the 20% mark. So 15 to 20% is where we would target a restaurant if we were going to do consulting with them. Now, they got to have the revenue base to do it. Without the revenue, there's no way to get it. But if they have the revenue, I always say if you have enough revenue, I can fix any problem and I can get you to 15 to 20% profit easily. It's just a matter of managing the metrics.
I had somebody on the podcast a few months back, and he also owns a chain of restaurants. And he said volume covers everything. That was his slogan. And
the challenge with that, though? The challenge with that, Nick, is that volume covers everything, but it also covers up your weakness as an operator. Okay? And so you made this comment a little bit ago about COVID. When COVID hit, we laid off 150 employees in one day, right? We shut down 6 locations. What you saw in COVID, not just in the restaurant business, but especially in the restaurant business, is it washed out the weak operators. They didn't have cash flow. They didn't have assets stacked up. They had too many bills. They weren't operating profitably, and they just weren't able to make it. If you're running a good, solid, profitable operation and you've got enough reserves set up and you've got all your stuff set up correctly, you will not get washed out in a COVID like a lot of folks did. So revenue does solve a lot of problems, but if you are a weak operator with a lot of revenue, as soon as you take a hit on that revenue, you're in trouble. So you got to make sure your numbers are in line no matter what that revenue number is.
Yeah, definitely. In your experience, do you find, I know you mentioned that chefs and maybe restaurant managers and people who don't have any business experience are the ones that a lot of times come into restaurants and fail, but do you see on the whole restaurant operators being good business people or typically no?
If you got a good business, yes. If you've got one that's struggling, no. I'll give you another example, and I think a lot of restaurant operators struggle with this because we hire management staff all the time. I can tell you 1 out of 10 managers that we interview understand the numbers within the restaurant because the owners don't tell them. So you have someone you've put in charge of your restaurant, and I'll say, well, like I remember this one young lady, I said, well, what is your food cost in the restaurant you're at now? She goes, well, we spend about $5,000 a week. I said, what does that mean? She goes, well, that's what we spend. That's our food cost. I'm like, no. I'm asking you what the percentage is of your food costs versus your food sales. And she's like, I have no idea. So you have managers that are supposed to manage your restaurant and they don't even have a clue what they're supposed to be managing. Essentially, you're just having them walk around and touch tables and make sure that people show up and leave on time. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more education you should give to your good management team if you ever want to be able to get away from your own restaurant and go do something else and let that thing operate on its own. I've got restaurants I don't even go to, right? I don't have to. My team knows the numbers are supposed to hit. They know that are being monitored. I get my reports every week that show me, so I don't have to step foot in there to know what's going on.
Sure. What about on the front end? You mentioned that you had one a restaurant location that didn't make it, and then you quadrupled down and bought 4 more.
Yep.
Are there metrics on the front end that you look at in terms of buying a business?
So same thing. I did a podcast on this. How do you buy a restaurant? And it's simple. You give me 24 months worth of P&Ls on a restaurant, month by month, side by side, right? So that I can look at all 24 side by side. I'm going to do what we call a trend analysis on your core metrics: food, labor, liquor, rent over revenue. And I can predict based on those metrics what's going to happen in that business. A lot of times when people go to buy a restaurant, and I literally just told somebody this 2 days ago, these restaurant brokers will say, oh, well, here's last year's P&L. Last year's P&L doesn't tell me anything. That restaurant could have been at $2 million last year, and right now it's running at $500,000 because you literally tanked it. That's not an accurate number. Or you'll see, well, here's the last year's, but we're giving it to you in one format. I don't want to see one format. I need to see the trend. Is that trend going down? And is it a steep decline, right? Is it level? Plus, I want to see all those percentages, how they stack up. When I bought that first, when I had the first restaurant that failed, and then I looked at the next 4 to buy, I looked at a P&L that, this is a crazy thing to say, but this guy had $30,000 in bounce check charges in the first 10 months of the year.
Wow. That's not
$30,000 in bounce check charges. He was running like a 48% food cost.
Yeah.
I remember we went in, I said, you're selling wings for $0.25. He's like, yeah, man, it drives a lot of people in. I said, they cost $0.25. Actually, they cost 27 cents. You're losing 2 cents on every wing. He goes, yeah, but we sell a lot. I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We got to raise the price on wings. He goes, people will stop coming in. I'm like, good. Because the more people come in and buy these wings, the more money you lose. He was clueless as to how the metrics work behind the business. So, when you're buying a restaurant, we got to look at the 24 months worth of P&Ls. Let's track it, look at the trends, see where the percentages are, and then we can tell you whether that restaurant is, as I said, a gold mine or somebody else's problem. It's pretty easy.
When you go to make an offer on a restaurant, do you look? How do you determine the price you're going to pay? Are you looking at maybe a revenue or EBITDA? What are you basing that on?
Yeah, so it's going to be EBITDA based, but it's also based on volume, or not volume, number of locations. So a single operator unit has a much lower EBITDA than, say, a 6 or 10 unit operator, right? So if I have a single unit operator doing $1 million a year at 10% profit, that's $100,000, right? He's making $100,000. I'm going to invest maybe $200,000 in buying that. If he gets 2x out of me, he's pretty good, because I know that $100,000 profit that he's making in that location is at risk. It's at risk of him leaving, me taking over, the customers getting mad. I've had that happen. Sales tanked when I took over because the customers didn't like me because they love the old guy. On the other hand, if you've got 6 to 10 locations and you have an operator that's not actually involved in the business, he's not the person, he's not the face, he's not there every day, he's not the person the customers see. Like I like to say, if I sold my restaurants, nobody would even know. People don't even know I'm the owner, right? That creates value in the business. So if I've got 6 to 10 locations, relatively stable income where the owner isn't the main operator, that's probably worth more like a 5 or 6x over a 2x on a single operator location. And then you have to dig into why the person's selling, right? Mm-hmm. I can tell you one I bought, I knew the guy had taken a job that was moving him out of state. I knew that his lease was about to renew and his franchise agreement was about to renew. And he only had 4 weeks. If he didn't sell it to me, he was out of business.
Wow.
So literally, I was not going to offer him very much because I knew he didn't have anything to offer me. It was a good business, but without me buying it, he was going to get 0 in 4 weeks. So we were able to come in at a much, much lower sales price on that kind of deal. So every deal is different. You got to look at them individually.
Yeah. That's a good segue into, you recently wrote a book called Know the Psychology of Sales and Negotiations. I actually purchased the book and read it. It was a great read.
There you go.
Yeah.
Look at that. I got my copy too.
Yeah, there you go. So tell me a little background on the book. What was the impetus for starting it? And what are some of the things that a reader can get from reading the book?
You know, I've done sales training. When I sold my companies in 99, 06, and 08, I started doing corporate sales management training. I've trained thousands of people, billions of dollars in sales through the teams. And what we really learned through all that is that sales is as much or more about the psychology of the way that the customer or client is thinking and less about what the salesman is pitching, right? Too many salespeople fail because they think that sales is about talking for 10 minutes about the benefits of whatever it is they've got, and it's really not. It's about making a connection with the client. It's about figuring out what I call the 3 whys in a win. Why are they buying? Why should they buy your product? Why should they buy from you? And when are they looking? So if you understand the psychology behind the person standing across from you, and you build a sales script in your head or a sales process around that psychology, your chances of closing go up like 1,000%. I mean, it's night and day.
Yeah. And in the book, you had 40 different lessons that you've learned and talk about in the book. And there was a few that I really stood out to me. Be willing to play the long game, understand once an offer is made, the next person who talks loses. I love that one. I have a mentor in the food service industry, and that's what he's always told me. Once you make your presentation and throw out your ask, stop talking.
Shut up.
That's it.
Just shut up and wait. And so the story behind that one, and I got that from Richard Branson because he wrote a book, and one of the things in his book was, if your first offer doesn't insult them, you've offered too much.
Yeah.
Because we call this anchoring the sale, the bottom of the sale, right? So I know in most situations, whatever I'm asking, if the other person's a negotiator, they're going to say no, right? And so I know they're going to say no, so I'm going to go high. This is the old high-low game, right? So if I'm buying, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to try to anchor you. I'm going to, whatever you say it is, I'm going to say no. I'm going to drop that price way down. And so the example you're talking about there was literally what I just said a minute ago. So they came to me about a restaurant and they said the guy wants 300,000. I said, I give him 2. And they said no. And then, so this other guy, Mike, bought it. And a year later, he came back and said, Mike wants to sell it. He'll sell it for 2. And I said, no, I'll buy it for 1. And he said, you offered 2 the last time. I said, that was the last time. And so another year goes by. It's just 2 years in now. And he comes back, he goes, all right, he said he'll take 1. I said, okay, I'll take a look at it at 1, right? This is called playing the long game. I never get excited about a deal. Deals are a dime a dozen. You have no idea when you say no what might come back to you. So I go in, I look at the deal. We do all the due diligence. I get all the numbers, interview the employees. This is when I found out that he had taken another job and he needed to leave. This is when I found out that the landlord lease had to be re-executed in 4 weeks. That's when I found out that the franchise agreement was also expiring and he had to re-sign for 10 years in 4 weeks. And so now I call this blood in the water. I got a guy, there's no way there's nobody else buying. So if he doesn't sell to me, he's going to get nothing. So we get to the table and I'm sitting in the booth at his restaurant and the broker's sitting with me and he said, okay, so are we ready to do this? And I said, I can't give you $100,000. He goes, well, what are you thinking? I said, I'm thinking 0.
Oh my gosh.
And I just didn't say anything. And he's looking at me and the broker's eyes got really big. Like, what the hell did he just say? Did he say 0? And we sat there for like 2 minutes just staring at each other. And I'm not going to say anything because the next person to talk loses.
That's right.
And finally he goes, I can't take 0. And when he said that, I had him.
Yeah.
I said, well, I tell you what, I'll buy your inventory. I'll refund you your lease amount. So you'll get out of here with maybe $25,000. And he goes, I can't take nothing. I said, I'll give you 10 grand. Otherwise I'm out. And he said, all right, fine, I'll take it. So we went from 300, a year later 200, a year later 100. He thought he was closing at 100. I bought it for 10.
That is an incredible negotiation.
Now that's not going to work all the time.
No.
But in this case, I anchored the deal at 0, understanding that I had him.
Yeah.
He had no place to go. There wasn't another person out there that was going to deal with him. So it was me or nothing at that point. I couldn't have done that in a different type of scenario, which is why you have to read. I said everything depends on the scenario. In that scenario, I knew I had him over a barrel.
Wow. It's so funny. When I was reading this book over the last couple of weeks, I would sit there. I was reading it at night. My wife and I, we like to read before bed. And there was a couple chapters in here really where you talked about kind of the story you just mentioned and really saying no to people within a negotiation. I think a lot of times the way people think is, okay, in that and that person wants 200,000. So I'm going to offer 150 and maybe split the difference with them. But you're coming in at just no, it's zero. I like that. And I was actually
Richard Branson.
That's right, Richard Branson. I was actually, while reading this book, in a negotiation to purchase a company, and there was moments where I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. And where typically prior to reading the book, I probably would have had wiggle room and, gave a little bit here, gave a little bit there. But instead I just said, no, I'm not going to do this, that, and the other. And it worked out. All of the things I said no to, I didn't have to execute on.
And by the way, I was with Richard Branson 2 weeks ago on Necker Island and was telling him this story, which is interesting. But it's funny how many people have come back to me and told me the exact same story, right? So I sit on city council here. I'm the liaison for police and fire. So the police and fire people are all kind of under my watch, right? Mm-hmm. One of our majors calls me one day and he goes, man, I finished reading your book. And he goes, this is incredible. I said, oh yeah? He goes, I've already put it in use. I said, well, what happened? He goes, I went in to buy a motorcycle. I walked in and they gave me a price and I said, no, I'm leaving. And he goes, that guy chased me all the way out into the parking lot, lowering the price about every 5 steps. He said, till I got to my car, and then I got a hell of a deal on that motorcycle because I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, yep, you just got to say no. And it's amazing. Because you know what? The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get it for a higher price. Mm-hmm. That's the worst that's going to happen. So why not anchor that sucker as low as you can get it and go from there?
Yeah, that's a really great point. That's a really, really solid point. You had another lesson in the book, and that was around read the script. I remember, so this chapter really hit me good, because I remember when I first started coming out of college. I was actually my senior year of college. I got a job working for free as an intern for a financial advisor for Wells Fargo Advisors. And I wanted to be a financial advisor at the time. And so he said, come in and you can work as much as you want. So I'd sit there each day after school. And the first thing he had me do was pull out a piece of paper and a pen and write out a script. And essentially he then gave me a list of 600 phone numbers to call. And I'd call each one of the numbers and go one by one. And I would just follow that script. If they said yes, then I'd go to this. If they said no, then I'd overcome that objection. I really like that mindset of read the script.
It's important for sales managers and sales trainers to understand that if you have somebody that's learning how to sell or they're in sales training, that script is your ability as a sales trainer to be on that phone call or in that presentation without you actually having to be there. Mm-hmm. Because you should know what works. You should know the psychology behind it. You should know how to do it. And so when I get salespeople and I say, read the script, and like, well, I want to do my own thing. And I always say, listen, when you prove to me that you don't need me to help you, then you can ad lib. But until then, say exactly what I'm telling you because I know what I'm telling you works. And so that's what they do. And if they get out there and they start selling, they start changing it, we pull them back out of the sales force, bring them back in, put them in a room and say, here we go. We're going to do it again. And you're going to keep doing this over and over until you finally learn to listen to me. Mm-hmm. Or we call it coaching you up or coaching you out. One of the two.
I like that. In high school, I did my speech for my graduation. And going into it, I had no script. And I told the people putting on the event that I'm just going to go out there and wing it. And what I have is what I have. And I was in and out in all of 30 seconds, probably 60 seconds. And I was so nervous. I was in front of, 1,000 people. And I had never really had that experience at all. So after that, I'm like, I'm going to just write out the speech moving forward. And I'm just going to read it until I get to a point where I feel comfortable and I don't need a script anymore.
Yep, you role play it.
Exactly.
And we put salespeople in the hot seat and we make them role play in front of their peers. And I love doing it because all the peers are sitting out there correcting the person on the hot seat. And then when they get on the hot seat, they're like, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm like, yes, I know. That's exactly why we're doing it. So you're getting to see both sides of the equation. And we do it over and over and over until it comes natural. I tell salespeople, when I can wake you up out of a dead sleep and you can read this script, that's when you know you're good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No doubt. You had another point too around sell them on an emotion. I really like that thought. I try to do that. I try to research people before going into a presentation to sell them on my company or whatever I'm trying to sell, and learn about them personally. And can I create some sort of paralleled emotion with them, because I feel like it really hooks them in a little bit and builds that personal touch.
Yep. I use this example in sales training, and I love using car salesman as an example, or car sales, because everybody's done it, everybody's been there, and everybody understands it, and it's very simplistic. And I always use the example, have you ever been to a car lot to buy a car?
Oh, yeah.
Before? Okay, so Nick, you've been to buy a car. When you walked on the car lot and the salesman came up to you, did he hand you the manual to the car and say, hey, I need you to read this manual?
No.
Did he take you back to the finance department and said, listen, I need you to understand the financing derivatives before we, take this car out for a drive?
Nope.
No. He wants to know, what are you looking for? What color, cloth or leather, standard automatic? Hey, man. Hey, Nick, you want to take this thing out for a drive? Mm-hmm. And the reason is he wants you to get in that car and fall in love with it. He wants you to pretend like you're driving by your neighbors, showing off your brand new car, feeling like a big shot. If you fall in love with a car, everything else is just a process, right? Mm-hmm. So anytime you're in a sales situation, you got to make people fall in love with whatever it is that you've got. And they don't fall in love with 1,000 facts and figures. They fall in love with the color, standard automatic, leather, the way it smells, and the way you look driving it down the street, right? So too many salespeople, they talk themselves out of the sale because they think they got to regurgitate every single thing in the world about what they're doing, and they don't. Mm-hmm. Look, if you're selling food to me, listen, give me a copy of your last couple of bills. I'm going to come back with an analysis. Okay. They come back with an analysis. They say, I can save you 6% on your food purchases going forward. I'm like, okay. They're not breaking the whole thing down. They're not telling me about how their vendors are better. I don't give a crap about how you think your trucks are going to be here on time. No, you're going to save me 6%? Okay. Or, Brian, what's the problem you have with your vendor today? Man, they didn't show up last week on a Saturday, and I didn't have any food Sunday morning. We were out of food. I mean, I'm so mad at them. I want to just drive over to the corporate office and bang. I hear, yep. Okay, here's what I can do to help you with that, right? So get them emotional, get them to fall in love with whatever it is, and then go on from there. Too many salespeople talk way too much.
I agree. Especially the salespeople who, after closing a sale, continue to talk after the customer has already said yes.
Oh my gosh!
Just stop talking and sign the paper or whatever the next step is to close the deal. Just move on. You got to stop talking.
I mean, we just went from a very large food broker starting with an S to a very large food broker starting with a P.
Yes.
And I told them no probably 3 times, and they kept coming back. Okay, let's do a little bit more. Okay, let's do a little bit more. Okay, let's do a little bit more, until they got it where it needed to be. And then I was like, let's pull the trigger.
Yeah,
right?
Look at that. Yeah. I think in my industry, or at least in my line of work as a food service broker, a lot of the training that we receive is around just selling the features and the benefits of the product. Really, what they're trying to say is really the details of the company. The company started in 1925, and these are the products that we sell, and it's shipping out here. It's like, it's just kind of talking points. And, are you really building any kind? What's the other person thinking of when you're saying all of this? Is it even resonating with them? Is it just going one ear and out the other?
For those people that can see us on camera, here's what they're thinking. I just tilted my head back and rolled my eyes in the back of my head. So if you can't see me, I don't care. If they're training that's because they're not salespeople, and they have fallen into the trap of thinking that people care about the details. They don't care about the details. Details are not what we fall in love with.
Yeah.
Nobody's handing you the operator's manual to the car. They want you to take it for a drive. That's exactly the deal. When the food broker says, hey man, come on into our kitchen, let's do some experimentation with our head chef here and see what we can make some dishes for you. And then if it works out, then we can show you how to buy the ingredients, and we'll take care of everything, and we'll build your food costs. And I'm like, cool, we can go into your kitchen. You're just going to making food for us? Like, yeah, I'm in. Let's go. Right. So these are things that are really super cool. We fall in love with.
You mentioned on the consulting side, working for small and medium-sized companies. Most of them, when you go in, did they have some sort of sales manual or training of any kind?
Very few have formal sales training. Very few have scripts, and that's why they struggle, right? Well, we taught Joe how to do X, Y, Z, so he's going to go out and sell. And I'm like, listen, here's what we know. We know that whatever product or service you're selling, and you'll find this in what you do, Nick, as well. There are probably 4 or 5 objections that you get 80 to 90% of the time. You get the same objections every single time. And yet we know what the objection is, and then we fail to create a script or a process around overcoming those specific objections until, here's what we teach. We teach people you have to overcome objections before the client has them, not at the end of the sales process. If you're overcoming an objection at the end of the sales process, you've already lost me. So if I know what those 4 or 5 objections are, I'm going to build a sales process and a script to overcome those objections during the fact-finding process before we ever get to the close. And then we use positive affirmations, we use pause for effect, we use check-ins. And so by the time we get to the close, there's nothing to close. I've already closed myself as a customer because you've built the proper script. You've overcome all my objections. I have nothing left to object to. Mm-hmm. If I have nothing left to object to, there's no place for me to go except buy.
Yeah, that's a good point. What about in a restaurant? Do you have a script for a waiter, a waitress, or even a host or hostess in terms of talking to a customer?
I'll give you a couple. These are my pet peeves, and we try to teach this to people. And they're my pet peeves, and I always tell people, how would you react if it happened to you? And if that's how you would react, then that's how the customer's reacting, right? Mm-hmm. So remember the badass drink we talked about?
That's right.
I'll give you another one, and I do this a lot, and I'll say, hey, let me ask you something, Nick. I have a question. You're brand new in my restaurant. I just hired you. You're going to work for me. I'm going to ask you a couple basic questions. What are the ingredients in iced tea? Not ice. A trick question.
Yeah.
And tea.
And tea. Ice and tea.
If I order an iced tea and you bring me a warm glass of tea with 3 warm cubes floating around the top, did you bring me a glass of iced tea?
No.
No. You brought me a glass of warm tea. And now I'm upset. The very first thing you did as a server is give me something that's not what I asked for, and now I'm upset. And you walked away, by the way, and I'm now going, hey, can I get a glass of ice? Right? Because you didn't take 2 seconds to look at that glass of iced tea and say, hey, there's no ice in there. And the excuse is always the same. Well, the tea was just made, it was warm. Okay, well, refill it back up with ice, right? It's giving a customer a good experience. Mm-hmm. And the other one is, and I love this one, when you go to the table, 2 things. Is the food half eaten and not finished? And if it is, what does that tell you? Nobody comes to a restaurant because they're not hungry. Mm-hmm. Which means if the hamburger is only half eaten, I promise you there's a problem. I promise. And you got to find that out. Yeah. And so what I always tell people is, as a manager, when you touch a table, hey, how is everything? If they say it was fine, that means it was bad.
Yeah, it's code word.
Good is good, fine is bad. Oh, it was really good. Okay, excellent. I noticed you didn't finish that hamburger. What was wrong with it? There was nothing. Come on, don't lie to me now. Nobody comes here unhungry. What was wrong with? Well, because they don't want to tell you. They just want to leave a bad Yelp review 10 minutes later.
Yes.
So we got to dig it out. So good is good, fine is bad, half eaten is bad. And we got to find out why, even if you got to push and dig in a little bit. And that creates a good customer experience. Well, I don't want to cause a problem. And as an owner, I'm like, listen, I need you to tell me what the problem is. Otherwise, how do I fix it? I need you to be happy, because if you're not happy, you're not coming back. If you leave and leave me a bad review, please, God, tell me the problem so I can fix it now. Right? That's when I need to fix a problem. So good is good, fine is bad, and half-eaten food, there's a problem. And a glass of iced tea should have ice in it.
Yes.
This is basic stuff, but it creates a much better experience for the consumer if you just watch for little things like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. You threw me off with the iced tea. I was like, oh my gosh, what are the chemical compounds in iced tea? And you're like, it's just ice and tea. I was like, of course. Do you have checks and balances in your restaurants in terms of food being delivered to the customer, making sure that it's correct on what they ordered?
Gosh, we call this the triple failure, right? I did a reel on this a couple weeks ago. If food comes out wrong, here's what we know. We know the cook did it wrong. We know the expo person didn't check it. And then we have a server or a runner who carried that food all the way across the restaurant, not understanding that it's wrong because they didn't look at the picture or even look at the ticket, set it down on a table and leave, and then have a server come back out only to find out that the thing's wrong also. So this is a triple failure in a restaurant. You got to take an extra 5 seconds from the person on the line to the person on the expo to the person that's serving. We have a big board of what the food's supposed to look like right there. I mean, literally right beside expo. All you got to do is look at the plate and look at the picture. Is that right? Right? So that's a big one, because, Nick, every item that comes back into your kitchen costs you 10 more items before you get your money back. The example I use is a $15 hamburger. If I deliver a $15 hamburger to your table and you send it back and I got to throw away and make another one, if my restaurant only has a 10% profit on a hamburger, that means I have a $1.50 profit and I have $8.50 of cost, right? So if that hamburger comes back, I've lost $15. To recover my $15, I need 10 hamburgers at a $1.50 profit to recover the $15 I lost on that one burger. Lose one, you got to sell 10 more to be broken even. And people go, oh gosh, but the hamburger really only has a hard cost of maybe, $3. I'm like, BS. I got a manager salary, a cook's salary, a kitchen manager salary, an expo salary. I got servers, I got managers, I got bartenders, I got rent, I got utilities, everything goes into the cost of that burger, not just how much the meat cost. So every item that comes back costs me 10 more items. That's why you take 5 extra seconds to make sure it's right before you send it out.
I like that. It's probably like, I would imagine your alcohol, especially when it comes to shots, ounce and a half, someone might purchase, but if you have a bartender that is over pouring, again, your liquor cost is eroding your profitability at that point.
Yep, you're watching my reels, Nick. I can see you're asking me these questions. So the reels cost 1 ounce of alcohol bankrupts your business. And we use the example of if a drink normally has 1.5 ounces of alcohol and it's a 22% food cost or liquor cost, which I told you earlier, and my restaurant's running, let's say, an 11% profit margin, right? So I have 22% alcohol costs, but I have an 11% overall margin because of all my fixed operating costs. That's at 1.5 ounces. If I go from 1.5 ounces to 2.5 ounces in that drink, my hard cost goes from 22% to 35%, 34%, something like that. It goes up 12 or 13% in my wholesale cost. Now, if my liquor cost goes up 12%, I only have an 11% profit margin in my restaurant. That 1 ounce of alcohol took me from an 11% profit to a 1% loss. And now I'm out of business, right? This is why we have to be really, really diligent on monitoring the food costs, liquor costs, and labor costs. Because if I'm only running a 10% or a 15% margin and my labor cost is an extra 4% and my food cost goes up 4% and my liquor cost goes up 4%, that's 12%. I'm now losing money. So it is a very, very fine margin line. You have to manage all your cost to maintain that profit margin. And even an ounce of alcohol can put you down.
I'm sure you've seen the show Bar Rescue with John Taffer, and that is a big problem that these bars have. They've gotten into these financially difficult situations because you have bartenders skimming off the top, or they're serving their friends, or it's the owner who's just giving away free drinks to people that he meets within the bar. So it's something you have to be very cautious of.
So super interesting. John Taffer has a restaurant concept called Taffer's Tavern, and the very first one is across the street from me in Alpharetta.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yep. So they opened the very first one there, and it is the entire concept is let's just say it's not working.
Oh, interesting.
The guy who rescues restaurants and bars isn't working.
It's not working. Oh, that's not good. Brian, in your career, looking far into the future, what do you still want to accomplish?
So I've long pitched in the world of business. If you're going to go into business, you're either going to be self-employed or you're going to be a business owner. And I get this from Rich Dad Poor Dad, by the way. Is one of my 3 main business books that I recommend to people. And self-employed means you've basically created a job for yourself. It's wholly dependent on you, right? So if you leave, there's no revenue. Owning a business means that you've built process, procedure, systems, much like my restaurants I never go to. If I sell them, nobody even knows that I'm gone. That's creating a business, right? The ups and downs on both of those. As a self-employed person, you don't have employees. Right now, as a business owner, I have almost 200. As a self-employed person, I can work when I want, where I want, with who I want. As a business owner, I get all kinds of crazies that come in my restaurants, right? And some of them are not fun people. So there's ups and downs on both, right? But as a business owner, I can sell someday and have an exit. As a self-employed person, I can't. I have always pitched to be a business owner because you want to create intrinsic value or legacy type wealth building systems, and you can't do that self-employed. So I've done this in all the businesses I've done. I will tell you that we will eventually sell the restaurant chain, and my next chapter in my life is what I'm doing now, which is I run this business accelerator I just started called the Force Multiplier, and I work with businesses not just in restaurants, but in all types of businesses, that I call them 1 to 10 million revenue, in helping them either scale up quickly if they're in business and they're not making money or not making enough, teaching them how to build those core metrics and track the P&L, reverse P&L analysis, or if they're looking to exit, show them how to structure their business so that they can get an exit in the next couple of years. So I really, really enjoy working with entrepreneurs, helping them succeed, watching them make money, and do really cool things. I've sold businesses. I'm good. I honestly don't need to do another one. So my passion in life right now is helping people.
I love that. I see that a lot with people who are very successful entrepreneurs or business professionals. They get to a point where they say, you know what, the money and that side, it's great, but now I just want to get into the part of helping others find their, dream or American dream.
Right.
Which is very admirable.
I was on Necker Island having a conversation with Richard Branson, for those of you who know Richard Branson. And I made a comment to him. I said, when I sold my companies about 15 years ago, I almost lost my motivation for business. I'd worked so hard for so long, dark to dark, 7 days a week, busting my ass, cost me a marriage. I sold a business. I made more money than I ever thought I'd make. And I thought, I'm done. I'm never doing it again. I lost my motivation. Mm-hmm. And he said, have you got your motivation back? And I said, yeah, but it's different. My motivation back then was that I needed to make money. That was my motivation. I needed to be rich. And today that motivation's gone. My motivation today is I want to help and watch other people. And I'm going to make a lot of money in the process of doing that. I'm not trying to be too altruistic here, but I want to watch and help other people make money and do the same things that I did, because that is really cool.
Sure. I've got a fun question. It has nothing to do with restaurants, nothing to do with food service. How the heck did you get together with Richard Branson?
So he hosts different groups on the island, on Necker Island, which is where he lives. And I have a friend here in Atlanta, and she just sold her company, and she's been going to this event every year for like 20 years. She has known that Richard is one of the 4 people I want to meet in the world. It's Richard Branson, Elon Musk, Kenny Chesney, and Peyton Manning. By the way, if anybody knows Peyton Manning, Kenny Chesney, or Elon Musk, can hook me up. You're my best friend for life.
Yes.
She knew Richard. So she called me. She said, I'm speaking at this event on Necker Island next week. Would you like to come? And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I've sailed around Necker Island, never been on it, and Richard's going to be there. She said, yeah, it's his birthday. I'm like, I'm there. So this was a giant bucket list event for me. Got to spend time with him every day for 5 days, had great conversations. Hell of a guy. So super fun.
What a once in a lifetime opportunity.
100%. Although I'm going next year, so it'll be twice in a lifetime.
I'm jealous. I
get to go back.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I don't know Peyton Manning or Elon Musk or Kenny Chesney, but maybe someone listening along does.
Somebody in the audience, hook me up, man. Let's do it.
If you can go back to your time in high school, coming out of high school, what advice would you give to yourself?
Remember, I failed high school as I was 16.
That's right.
And I came from a very rough childhood. I had a chip on my shoulder the size of a Volkswagen BMW. I was an angry young man. All I wanted to do in life was succeed and prove to the world that I wasn't a loser that I thought everybody thought that I was. We're getting into some psychology here, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was driven from the age of 18, 1,000% to build a business, succeed, make money, be successful, buy things. That was my only drive. I can tell you that I did not spend as much time with my children as I wish now that I would have, and it ended up costing me a marriage. And if I could go back to that person back then, I would say, listen, relax. It's going to be okay. You need to spend more time with your family. Don't be so consumed with success that you lose everything that's important in your life. And that's the advice I would give myself.
That's I like that. That really resonates. My wife and I, we got married just about a year and a half ago. We've been together though for 12 years. And one of my goals, my professional goals, is I know that success will come because I'm only 30 at this point. Success will come in my life, and I want to be able to be married to Carly my entire way through. So it's important to me. And I really like your advice of just relax, because sometimes you get caught up in the moment, especially when you're trying to grow a business and, you have your successes and your failures, and it's easy to get caught up in the negatives. But It's
We are
important to just
men.
relax.
We are warriors. We think we're supposed to go out and conquer the world. And you think you're doing your job as a man by succeeding. And I can tell you, when we sold our companies and I said, hey, we win. I mean, we have all the money we're ever going to need. Let's go enjoy the rest of our lives and party. And she's like, you have not been nice to me for the past 15, 20 years. I don't want to do it with you anymore. Mm-hmm. And that was tough, you know? So you've won the world and lost what was really important. Don't do that.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Titans of Foodservice podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation. For those listening, how can they connect with you? Where can they find your new book? What's the best way to find Brian Will?
This is easy. It's brianwillmedia.com. brianwillmedia.com. My books, my podcasts, my coaching, everything about me is on there. If you want to talk, drop me a message, set up a call, whatever you want to do, brianwillmedia.com. That's where I am.
Excellent. Brian, thank you so much.
Nick, it's been awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course.